The United States of America is going through a very interesting phase. It is interesting because in prospect, we have two presidential candidates who have had the opportunity to compete in the past. And we have a presidential candidate in the person of Donald J. Trump, who is not your typical American politician. He appeals to a segment of the population that feels threatened. And he is competing at a time when the United States of America is facing a number of challenges. So the country is going through a different phase, and that phase creates certain dangers. And this is the context in which the attempted assassination must be seen. Of course, the jury is still out as to who was behind the assassination. There will be many conspiracy theories and theorists, but I hold the view that holding all factors constant, that single act is going to energize Donald Trump in a very unique way. And many individuals who are sitting on the fence may very well be inclined to vote for him in order to introduce change. It is not lost on me that his clarion call now is "Make America Great Once Again." Remember when he competed for the first time, it was "Make America Great Again." And he is now telling the world, and of course the United States of America specifically, it is our opportunity to make America different. You've seen the 5 years that I was away, and in my estimation, America has lost its traction. America has not played the role that it ought to play. And I'm making you the promise that it is I and my party that is going to make America what America ought to be. Whether that is true or not is another debate, but for purposes of campaign, it is important for him. It must also be remembered that during his first term, he demonstrated quite clearly that his administration was going to be inward-looking. And this administration, as we have seen, has had great dalliance with NATO. It has had some flirtatious relationship with the African continent, has had some much more intimate relationship with the countries in the Pacific, such as the South Koreans. And Trump is saying, I'm going to follow a different path. Once again, these are campaign promises, and we want to see how that will impact the rest of the world. But interesting times indeed. After 2 days, I think, or 2 days after the assassination attempt, the President Joe Biden told Americans, let's lower the political temperature so that we do not have a situation where we solve our problems in this manner. And that manner means through violence. The former President Barack Obama is also on record as saying that America ought not to follow the path of violence. And it sends one clear message that American politics is now taking a turn, which is very dangerous, that the American political divide is now so very dangerous that in the eyes of some, even eliminating candidates would be one of the ways of resolving these problems. Of course, I'm saying this acutely aware that the question as to who or which organization or individuals were behind the assassination. But it is important to note that there are conspiracy theorists out there who hold the view that this was an attempt to eliminate a candidate who is likely to win the elections. And it sends a clear message to the world that there is no perfect security. Even a country that is in the habit ordinarily of telling others and warning others using their security system that they are in danger is also susceptible to danger herself. And it also sends a clear message that there is nothing like perfect security. But we must also look at the historical context. Assassinations are not things that are known to America. We knew in the 1960 John F. Kennedy was assassinated. Ronald Reagan survived an assassination attempt, and outside of politics, we know that individuals like Martin Luther King Jr. were assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated. But of course, it is at a different level when a candidate whose rhetoric is sometimes deemed to be vitriolic is the subject of an assassination attempt. It sends a very dangerous message and also serves to demonstrate that the political divide in the United States of America is widening by the day. The demographies are changing quite dramatically, and that must never be ignored. There are those who hold the view that the rise in the numbers of Hispanics and Blacks threatens the base of the white population, and these are things that cannot be wished away. And therefore, there is a combination of factors which defy simplistic and simple analysis and answers, but dangerous times in the United States of America. Perhaps it is too early to say that, but what I would say is that there are heightened tensions. Civil war, no. But I think that there are heightened tensions which, if not properly managed, could lead towards a very dangerous path, because this is in the run-up to the election. And if you listen to the rhetoric and the messages that are flying about across the political divide, you can see how very animated they are. You can see how very vitriolic they are. You can see how very angry people are. And when you are in such an environment, then you must understand that it can be dangerous. And when tensions are heightened and demographies are changing and changing dramatically, it cannot be business as usual. But I think that the country is still a country that holds together, and these crises will only test the strength of American institutions in a manner perhaps that they have never been tested before since the civil rights movement. You know, Kenya appeared to have acquired a very unique status amongst African countries in the recent past. The head of state of Kenya, President Ruto, was given a state welcome in the United States of America. Kenya became a very close non-member ally of NATO, and Kenya is seen as being of geostrategic significance, and we know that we received quite a number of goodies from the United States of America, which, in a manner of speaking, to use this cliche, Kenya became the blue-eyed boy of the Biden administration. And I'm deliberately saying the Biden administration because that does not necessarily mean there is a darling of the United States of America for all times. And in the recent past, we have seen that even that relationship is being shaken by the domestic realities in Kenya herself. And the Biden administration therefore had that clarity in her relationship with Kenya and by extension Africa. But if we go by history and we go by the administration of President Trump in his first term, it is almost as if Africa did not matter. And many of us will remember when he made that infamous and, in the eyes of many insensitive countries, shithole countries. He was making reference to, among other nations, the continent of Africa. And if that is the kind of foreign policy approach that will be pursued in his administration if he is elected in the month of November and sworn in the month of January 2025, it tells you that once again, Africa will be peripheral to their foreign policy. But never say never, because Africa, in many ways, is also a continent that cannot be ignored because of her resources. And for that reason, it is possible that in President Trump's possible second term, he would think differently. But holding all factors constant, I think the inclination will be a relationship with Africa that is not as intimate as it is with other parts of the world. I think that the administration will survive this storm. It will be an administration that will be on tenterhooks, but I hold the view that it will survive. And I say this because history teaches me that the political class are capable of getting into what I call political rapprochement. And given the ethnic basis of our politics, if the ethnic kingpins enter into an arrangement that satisfies short-term political interests, then the agitation will be undermined in a very dramatic way. And it is possible, therefore, that the administration will survive. It will have been beaten, it will have been dented, it will have been injured, it will be hobbling along, but it will hobble along, holding all factors constant to the next election in the year 2027. And what will happen is that the administration will make a number of concessions, and those concessions will possibly deflate the agitation for its removal. Let's understand the current problems in Kenya from a historical context. I think for a number of years, this has been boiling up, that we have had successive administrations which have made promises to the people, which in many cases have not been fulfilled. We have young people in different professions in the business sector who, after every election, are made to believe that things are going to change dramatically, that you are going to have opportunities to fulfill your ambitions. And this has not happened, with the consequence that we have had these young people to be in a corner where they are not only angry but hungry. They are not only helpless but hopeless. We thought they were helpless, but we now know better. And this has come to a head. And what we see now is a group of young men and women who are saying it can no longer be business as usual. We observe you when you are conducting your campaigns, promising us heaven on earth, but when you get into political office, you don't deliver. And what we see are individuals within your administration wallowing in the sea of opulence and doing so in our very faces. We can no longer take it. And when, therefore, the finance bill came and was aimed at taxing people even more, it was one of the triggers, in my view, not the cause. It was the trigger of a number of things. And that is why, therefore, you've seen that beyond the effective rejection of the finance bill, there have been many demands. Demands including, we want a leaner, meaner government. We want certain things to happen. We want the institutions that are created by the Constitution to perform the task for which they were created. We want a smaller parliament. We want the devolved units to be fewer and effective. We want the office of the president to be one that is responsive to the people. We want the civil service to reflect the face of the nation, and a myriad of other demands, which are legitimate demands. And we have already seen that the President of the Republic of Kenya, William Ruto, has conceded to some of those demands. First of all, it started with the effective rejection of the finance bill and subsequently removing the budgetary allocation to unconstitutional offices, and thirdly, dissolving his cabinet. And the demands are coming up by the day. The message that is being sent to the president is, we want change. We want meaningful change. We, the young people, are tired of promises. We want governments that deliver. We want opportunities. We don't want tokenism. We want a Kenya that works. We want a Kenya that delivers on her promises. And this is the message that must be understood. We are tired of these political games. We are tired of musical chairs. And this message has not only gone to the president, it has even gone to the opposition. It has gone to the leaders of the opposition that we do not want you to ride on the crest of what we have created in order to get into political gamesmanship. We are tired of that, and we know that you want to remove the wind off our sail. We will not allow you. So the message is clear. The message is simple. The message is being repeated day after day. And the net effect of it is that the country does suffer. And the sooner that this is resolved, the safer the country is. Because as all of us know, whenever there are threats of occupation of critical institutions such as parliament, such as the State House, which is now blocked from public access, then the business community suffers, the economy suffers, and indeed the question is, for how long will this go on? And what are the scenarios that are likely to emerge out of it? It is the duty of those who are charged with political responsibility to get the country out of this muck and mire, because if it continues in this way, then the country is in danger. The country is on tenterhooks. The country is at crossroads. And the sooner this is done, the sooner that the administration realizes that it's not business as usual, the safer this country is. And we must remind ourselves that countries can be lost. And indeed, countries have been lost. And it takes a long time to repair a country when it has been lost. The best way to bring about change is to be always ahead of your time. That is what visionary leadership is all about. Visionary leadership is a leadership that is capable of identifying the needs of a country. And once they have identified the needs of those countries, to deliberately begin to put in place measures that are going to deliver on the promises that are made. If, for example, we recognize that opportunities, employment opportunities, are necessary in order to absorb the young men and women who are graduating from institutions, it's the role of government to create an enabling environment. The creation of an enabling environment then allows the private sector to create opportunities. If it is in the area of giving people the environment to invent and to innovate, it is important that the government does so. If it is in the area of allowing young people to have access to reasonable credit, that is what government does. But when a government or an administration gets into power and has overpromised and is seen to be reneging on the promises that they made, then the reaction will be as we have seen it. The people will say, you promised to deliver on A, you are not delivering. And when we look at the trajectory you've taken, there is no possibility that there will be such delivery. Then people will use other means. And those other means include protest, which is the language of the unheard. Protest is the language of the unheard. And you will note that this particular young population chose the path of demonstration to make their case. It is possible, and there is evidence to suggest that those demonstrations were then infiltrated by individuals who perpetrated chaos and violence and caused and occasioned the loss of property, with the consequence that young people were killed, which is most unfortunate. But the most important thing is that every government has the duty to listen to our population. This is why we say that more important to any government is not this generation, but generations which are yet to be born. And of course, this generation is also critical because any society that does not pay regard to her young men and women is a society adrift and a giant headed to the rocks. And that is where we now find ourselves, because these individuals also say we are leaderless, we are tribeless. And one of the things that is important now is that we must have a structured engagement with government. And that government must be a government that is prepared to deliver on time-bound promises. Time is of the essence in this arrangement. Otherwise, history has demonstrated that if you don't take care of this kind of engagements, or if you don't take care of this kind of degeneration, rather of agitation, then it can degenerate. Remember, this is not the first time that we have had agitation from young people. History is replete. In the 1908, we remember how the Turkish administration was overthrown, gave birth to the famous English saying, Young Turks, in 1908. We remember the agitation that took place in Europe during the rise, the student movement. We remember what took place in South Africa with the Soweto massacres. You remember what took place in China during the Tiananmen Square in 1980s, what took place in South Korea in 1980s, what took place during the Arab Spring in our very lifetime. And you can see that the agitation that have taken place in Kenya is also being emulated by other young Africans. I've seen the Nigerians take a cue from it, the Zambians take a cue from it, Malawians take a cue from it. So it is a message that there is some restlessness amongst young people because the economies are not performing for them. There's some restlessness because they are not benefiting from the dividends of government, but they can see a small percentage of individuals enjoying and swimming in largesse, and that they cannot tolerate, and that must stop. And if it doesn't stop, it will be checked. You see, every agitation, every protest must have an end game. What is the end game? This is the first question that we must ask ourselves. Is the end game to have all the demands met? And if the end game is to have all the demands met, is there an opportunity for constructive engagement? What some people don't want to hear. Is there an opportunity for dialogue? And what I heard the Kenyan youth saying, and what I hear them saying through the various platforms, is that if there is going to be engagement, we don't want an engagement amongst the political players in any event. These political players who are pretending to engage on our behalf, most of them have been in the political arena for the last 30 years. At one time, they're on the same side. At another time, they're on separate sides. And we know what they have been doing. They only do that which is in their best interest to the exclusion of all else. If you want to engage with us. It is us who have raised these issues. And it is us, therefore, whom you must engage. And I hope that the administration of President William Ruto will make every effort to engage these young Kenyans in a constructive way so that those politicians who simply want to take advantage, opportunistic and selfish, navel-gazing politicians who simply want to benefit for purposes of occupying public office must be shut out so that the young men have the country repaired in a constructive way. Although, of course, somebody may ask, but they have said they are leaderless. They have said that they are tribeless. Who do you engage? I believe that their leadership is beginning to emerge. If you watch very keenly, there are young men and women who are now beginning to articulate their position through public media. And if time is taken, it is these individuals who will then be the vanguard with whom to engage in the short term. Let us remind ourselves that youth is not a permanent state. Those who are young today will be old in a few years' time. And we must also remember that there is not a society that does not have different segments. We have old people whom I believe have the opportunity and the experience to make contribution to their society. They are the younger people who holding all factors constant, will live for a little longer, and they are simply saying, create a society which is going to enable everybody to thrive in the short, medium, and long time. What characteristics do you expect of such individuals? They must be patriots. They must be young men and women who know and understand the dynamics of the purpose of politics. The whole idea of politics and the constitution of governments throughout the world and throughout history has been to create an environment where men and women have the opportunity to express themselves and to use their talent, intellectual and otherwise, for the benefit of improvement of the quality of the people's lives in all sectors, whether it's in education, in health, or in agriculture. So they must be knowledgeable. There must be individuals who are prepared to sacrifice and to use their talent for the general good. In a multi-ethnic society such as ours, there must be people who are capable of looking and exploiting talent without looking at the ethnic extraction or the racial extraction of their compatriots. And they must be people who understand that leadership is not about using office for personal benefit, but for the general good. These are the characteristics that we expect of these young men and women who, in the fullness of time, as they grow older, will also hand over the baton to another generation. One of the things that I think annoys young Kenyans and by extension young Africans are individuals who, when they get into political office, do not want to leave. At age 70, they still want to be youth leaders. At age 80, they still want to claim to be youth leaders. They do not want to give opportunity for younger people to serve their countries. And this, I think, is something that must stop. Individuals who have been with us here since the 1980s in the political class had better do the right thing. Simply get out. Get out so that they can serve as advisors. They must not, in the nature of things, just remain in office because they have been so used to using public funds that they do not know how to survive outside of public office. And there is no shortage of them in Kenya and in Africa. And the youth are saying, no, your time is up. I hope so. I hope that young people now see the value. Who do you vote into office? In the recent past, in Kenya and in most of Africa, people have gotten into office because they were voted by their tribesmen and tribeswomen, because they had money which they had stolen and they used to bribe the electorate, and because young people did not care to vote because they thought they had nobody to vote for and nothing to vote for. With the consequence, therefore, that we have ethnic bigots in office, with the consequence that we have individuals who ought not to be in office running the affairs of the country. And we are now recognizing that that is a trend that must not be allowed. My hope is, as long as we continue to use the ballot, that young people have now recognized that if they want to change things through the ballot, they must, number one, have the voting card. Number two, they must wake up to vote. Number three, they must protect their vote. In the last general elections held in the Republic of Kenya, we know that nearly 8 million people did not vote. If they had come out and voted, perhaps we would have a different dispensation. So I hope that message is going out loudly and clearly to the young Kenyans and by extension young Africans. As long as the medium of getting political leadership is the ballot, it is important that you become an individual who is in civic engagement through voting. And that is the way to go. Otherwise, the political environment will always be manipulated, and we'll always have individuals who know how to manipulate the ballot, and the consequences can be dire. Politics must no longer be understood in the manner in which it has been understood. Things are changing dramatically and in a very dynamic manner. We have a generation almost throughout the world who are not prepared to wait. They want what I call microwave solutions, instantaneous solutions. They can no longer afford the luxury of waiting. But let us look at it in the context of history. I think it is a British politician, Winston Churchill, who once said that a democracy is perhaps one of the worst forms of government until you look at the other forms of government. If it is therefore understood in that context, the reason why people are agitated is because year in, year out to mean every election cycle, they see men and women parading themselves and making promises which are not delivered. And they are saying, for how long shall we wait? Shall we wait for Godot to come to deliver us? We see them get into office as paupers, some of them. Within 2 years, they have become multimillionaires, donating and distributing money as if it was confetti. We cannot wait. And this impatience is what is informing the next course of political arrangements, so that I see a world that is going to want of the political class that we are no longer just interested in you telling us that we have voted you for 5 years, we have voted you for 7 years, we want delivery. And what this is going to do is going to create a new generation of patriots who will join politics. What has happened, particularly in Africa in the last 30 years, is that politics had become attractive for the wrong reasons. People were attracted to politics because it was the shortest avenue to material wealth without consequence. But if this agitation continues, then that class and that category of individuals who saw politics as a lottery will begin to fade off, and a new crop of individuals who truly want to serve will join the political arena. And that, I think, is something that is desirable. So that if you go into politics, you know it is going to politics and into office to serve. And that will happen sooner rather than later, because you'll then know that being in political office is not being in a comfort zone. It is being in a dangerous zone where if you don't deliver, we'll literally chop off your heads. And this happened throughout history. If you look at the history of Europe, look at the history of Latin America, look at the history of Asia, look at the history of Africa. If you did not deliver in those days, we chopped off your head. If you built a bridge and we wanted to test whether the bridge was worthy, it is you who built it who would cross it first. These are things that are going to happen, and this impatience is going to give birth to a different political dispensation.